Hello friends, welcome back. I am Audhendra Yadav. The topic that is I'm going to discuss and share with you about the development that is going on in the South China Sea, particularly as per the China, more assertive China is growing concerns into the Indo-Pacific region and the freedom of navigation and maritime highways, free float of trade and various other things. So the more assertive China and its aggressive nature and the political setup is authoritarian and they don't follow the international uh, rule-based international orders. So that is the problem they are creating into South China Sea. As per the Asia nation is concerned, particularly Philippines and Vietnam, uh, there is a nine dash line so-called by the Chinese government that the 90% of the South China Sea belongs to China. Their claim is. But with respect to this statement, the International Court of Arbitration uh, delivered his judgment into the favor of Philippines, and the China withdrew from the judgment, final acceptance of final judgment before the final judgment came out. China withdrew from the petition cases which was filed by the Philippines. Uh, so the Chinese action into the South China Sea is very alarming, and it is uh, going to define the future of next 40-50 years of international politics, because the tribunal while delivering the judgment uh, went and delivered the um, following points that I'm going to make. Is tribunal found that the China has violated the sovereign rights of the Philippines in its exclusive economic zone by number one, interfering with the Philippines fishing and petroleum exploration, because a special economic zone, it is, the special economic zone uh, has the country has some right of fishing and petroleum exploration kind of thing. So the China is violated, and they're not allowing the Philippines authorities to do so. So the second thing, the constructing artificial islands. China is constructing artificial islands into the South China Sea. And point third, the failing to stop Chinese fishermen from fishing in the zone. The Chinese fisherman is forcefully uh, they are fishing into the special economic zone of Philippines. Uh, these 3 points, actually, the tribunal cited in his judgment, it added that China had reduced the traditional fishing rights of Philippines fishermen and that by physical obstructing Philippines vessels. So that is the very bullying kind of thing. That's why international community is saying that China is very assertive and aggressive in nature. Such kind of forces is very bad, putting the very bad precedence for the coming hours. So Beijing had raised the serious risk of collision, the risk of conflict and kind of war may take place if the China is going in this way, obstructing the Philippines vessels in the region. So that is very alarming thing. And finally, it determined that the China had no legal right. The tribunal, in his statement, said that the China had no legal basis for asserting historic rights of reserves located within sea areas under the tribunal jurisdiction. So it is, I told you such kind of thing China is doing. It is essential to remember that the tribunal did not rule that it was unlawful in principle for China to undertake construction activities on the disputed islands that it occupies, and that there is nothing in the decision that would make it unlawful for China to construct military installations on the islands it occupied, with the exception of mischief reef. It's kind of a reef is mischief. But the tribunal emphasized that the dispute is driven by their fundamentally different interpretation of separate rights under the United Nations law of the sea in the South China Sea, which should be done in response to a China that is assertive and disobeying the international law. China is more assertive and disobeying the international laws. So keep these issues in mind. I would tell you that the uh, Philippines government, particularly this government, which is on governing right now, is not aligning with China's government decisions. So they are feeling right now according to their strategy. So on that strategic front, the first they invited and they gave some islands, some spots, and some kind of places the United States military to install their military installation into 9 places in the Philippines. And Philippines also building the relationship with India, arch rival of India, China. China is arch rival of India, and India is vice versa. So the Philippines is knowingly developing the relation with India And India is offering his BrahMos kind of missile to uh, Philippines because China is fielding Pakistan against India. Okay, so the India is balancing act they are adopting and helping. India has also a grand strategy for Indo-Pacific region because India is the grouping in with Quad groups, Japan, Australia, United States, and India is also in there. India has a free pathway maritime ambitions for global goods. So the India is also raising its voices globally and strategically helping Philippines in some and great extent. So the Philippines authorities and defense ministers came to India and they signed uh, many agreements. The fifth meeting of Philippines-India Joint Commission was 29th June 2023. They did it, and the following things they tried to build up: a decision to open the resident defense achieved office in Manila. A very important thing is this: defense residence defense achieve is being developed into the Manila, meaning the Philippines in some corner of the Philippines. It will be developed, boosting cooperation between the coast guards of the two nations. Point third, acquisition of naval assets by the Manila under the concessional line of credit by Delhi. The Indian government offering line of credit to some sort of military assistance being given to the Philippines through the line of credit, yeah, and the expansion of uh, training and joint exercises, on maritime security and disaster responses. And fourth point is that commencing a maritime dialogue are some examples of evolving strength of this nautical partnership. Okay, so that's the very thing is going on. And however, the most notable development was the agreement on regional and multilateral issues, particularly on maritime highways such as the South China Sea. I told you, and while India reiterated its consistent position on adhering to the international law, including the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea, its unambiguous call to respect the 2016 arbitration award on the South China Sea. India supports it, yeah, and that's a very issue that is going on. If you allow me, I would tell you the some sort of discussions under the United Nations Convention on Law of the Sea under the Annexure 7. The parties of the absence of a party or the failure of a party to present its case shall not be a bar to the proceedings. So China, they exited from the proceedings, but the convention itself says that it is binding. Yeah, keep in mind, it is binding. The Philippines had submitted a case of arbitration into the Permanent Court of Arbitration in order to settle dispute with China. Despite China's formal withdrawal from the arbitration on the 19th February 2013, the proceedings continued as scheduled under the UN CLOS guidelines because there is no exit uh, concept into the this law, international law, because it is binding. Otherwise, if any state not obeying, not following the principles of international laws, then there is a possibility of international war on the maritime domain. So that's the problem we are witnessing right now. So the Chinese more assertiveness and non-binding kind of things is really uh, putting the word into the hot water. The PCA, Permanent Court of Arbitration, finally released the awards on 2016, 12 July 2016. The arbitration took into the account maritime rights, the status of particular marine features, historical rights, and the legitimacy of particular Chinese actions into the South China Sea. The Manila claimed it is illegal. The tribunal decision is final and binding in accordance with the UNCLOS Law of the Sea, Article 296 and Article 11 of the Annexure 7. It is binding. Okay. So let's see if China is not accepting the decision of this court. So that's why we are witnessing a kind of group politics into this region, and many national and international, regional and international countries are now putting their efforts to contain the Chinese action. Let's see, stay tuned with me. The development that may in future takes place, I will share with you. Thank you very much for your for listening. Thanks.